Hello dear friends, welcome back. We are discussing about the muscles of the back region. Our previous lecture was about the first muscle, that is the trapezius muscle, and this was all about the trapezius muscle, its actions, its blood supply and its innervation. Now the second muscle in the back region is the latissimus dorsi muscle. Right, you can see on the screen the latissimus dorsi. The latissimus dorsi muscle is the widest muscle in the human body. In the human body, the most wider muscle is the latissimus dorsi. What is the shape? The latissimus dorsi is flat triangular shaped muscle. It is flat and triangular muscle, right? What is its location? It's located on the back that stretches to the sides behind the arms and is partly covered by the trapezius muscle on the back near the midline. Right, so above it you can see here, this is the trapezius muscle, you can see, which we discussed in the last lecture, trapezius muscle in the previous, and this is latissimus dorsi. Right, so you can see this is the big flat muscle, triangular muscle. Right, so about shape, about location. Now what is the origin of this muscle? It arises from four different regions. It has a vertebral part, it has an iliac part, it has a costal part, and it has a scapular part also. Now let's see. The vertebral part of this muscle is attached to the spinous processes of T7, T8, T9, T10, T11 and T12 vertebra. Right, this is the vertebral part. Here is the vertebral part, right, through thoracolumbar fascia. Right, then there is the iliac part of it. It is attached to the posterior third of the crest of the ilium. If you follow the cursor of my mouse here, you can see this is the iliac crest here, right, and this is the anterior side of the iliac crest, and this is the posterior side of the iliac crest. Right, so we say the iliac part of this muscle gets its origin from the posterior third of the crest of the ilium. Right, and what is the costal part? So its costal part gets its origin from 9, 10, 11 and 12 ribs, and the scapular part is the part of this muscle, is the origin point of this muscle, which gets its origin from the inferior angle of the scapula. Right, so this muscle gets its origin from four different parts: the vertebral part, the iliac part, the costal part and the scapular part. I hope you understood it. Now what is the insertion of this muscle? You can see this part is the insertion. Right, it is inserted into intertubercular sulcus of the humerus. Right, intertubercular sulcus of the humerus. There are two tubercles, greater tubercle and lesser tubercle. In between the two tubercles there is a groove or a sulcus, which is called intertubercular groove or sulcus. What is the action of this muscle? It effectively extends the arm, extends the flexed arm. Right, it adducts and internally rotates the arm. Now look carefully: extension, adduction, rotation. If the humerus is fixed against the scapula, it pulls the pectoral girdle backward as a whole. So backward pulling, right, backward pulling, extension, adduction, rotation of the arm, right, and the backward pulling of the pectoral girdle. All these are the actions of this muscle. What is the blood supply of this latissimus dorsi muscle? Latissimus dorsi gets its oxygenated blood from the thoracodorsal artery, perforating arteries of 9, 10, 11, posterior intercostal arteries, and first, second and third lumbar arteries. So from lumbar arteries, from intercostal arteries, and from thoraco dorsal artery, it gets its blood supply. Here you can see. And what is the innervation? It is innervated by the nerves which arise from C6, C7 and C8 vertebra, which we call thoracodorsal nerve. Thoracodorsal nerve. This one is thoracodorsal nerve. So it innervates that muscle. Okay. The next thing, all this was about the muscle which is called the latissimus dorsi muscle. The next muscle, next to this muscle, what is that muscle? That is the levator scapulae. Levator scapulae means the muscle which elevates your scapula. You can see here, this is the levator scapulae muscle. Look carefully, this one. Whenever this muscle contracts, it will pull up the scapula, right? Whenever this muscle will contract, it will pull up the scapula. That's why they call it levator scapulae. So the third muscle in the back region is levator scapulae. The first muscle was trapezius muscle, the second muscle was latissimus dorsi, and the third muscle is levator scapulae. Now let's go for it. What is levator scapulae muscle? Levator scapulae is a posterior axio-appendicular muscle. Axio-appendicular muscle. Axio-appendicular we call it, why? Because it is the muscle which connects your appendicular skeleton to the axial skeleton. You can see this is your axial skeleton, and scapula belongs to appendicular skeleton. So that's why we call it axio-appendicular muscle that connects the upper limb to the vertebral column and lies in the posterior triangle of the neck, right? So levator scapulae muscle lies in the posterior triangle of the neck. It is axio-appendicular muscle. It connects the upper limb to the vertebral column. It is long and slender in shape. It is situated at the back and side of the neck, right? What is its origin? It arises from the transverse process of C1, C2, C3 and C4 vertebrae, right? You can see here, I have shown also in the screen. If you follow the pointer, 1, 2, 3 and 4. C1, C2, C3 and C4, and this is the origin of the levator scapulae muscle. And what is the insertion? It inserts in the medial border of scapula from superior angle to the root of the spine of the scapula. So you can see here, it is inserted into the medial border of the scapula. What is the actions of this muscle? Levator scapulae muscle performs actions in two different regions, the scapulothoracic joint and the cervical joints. So at the scapulothoracic joint, it draws the scapula superior medially, rotates the glenoid cavity inferiorly, right? And at the cervical joint, it causes the lateral flexion of the neck. Lateral flexion of the neck, as we call it, the ipsilateral extension of the neck. So lateral flexion and extension of the neck, these are the actions. What is the blood supply? Levator scapulae muscle is supplied by the transverse cervical and ascending cervical arteries, branches of the thyrocervical trunk. So levator scapulae muscle is supplied by thyrocervical trunk simply. And then what is the innervation? It is innervated by the anterior rami of the nerves of C3 and C4, the dorsal scapular nerve, which is a branch of the C5 nerve, right? So all this was about the levator scapulae. So the three muscles we discussed, the trapezius muscle, the latissimus dorsi muscle and this levator scapulae muscle. In the next lectures we will discuss about rhomboid major and rhomboid minor. That will be enough for the back muscles. So see you guys in the next lecture. Till then, Allah Hafiz.